it's been a minute since we've been in Exodus because we've had, we had Easter, and so there was that, and it just, I don't know, maybe we've only missed a week of being in Exodus, but it just feels like it's been a minute, and so I was super excited to get back into Exodus chapter 3 today. Does everybody have a handout?
That one works.
Everybody get one? Okay, this one works if you need it. If you're watching us online, down in the notes, you can find a link for the handout that all the girls in the room have so that you can follow along with us or print it out if you'd like. But those notes are there for you to use. So we're in Exodus chapter 3 and we're finishing Exodus chapter 3. So rewind your brains with me for just a second. Remember, please be kind. Rewind. Remember those?
Yeah.
I just dated myself a lot.
I'm right there with you.
Just saying. We were talking this morning, side note, we were talking this morning on the way here about the VCR, one of the first VCRs that we had when I was a little kid that had a remote. Except that the remote was connected to it by a little skinny cord. So you still had to stand like 3 feet away from the thing. Anyway, we have progressed, okay? So come on in, girls. Do we have more copies? I don't know how many
I don't think so. I'll go make some.
Do you have any more?
We need a bigger class
Okay.
tomorrow, right?
I know. Look, I've got some plans to rearrange our room if it works that I think will give us some more space.
Awesome.
Okay, so rewind. Please be kind. Rewind with me back to our last lesson where we were in chapter 3, but we were specifically looking at the most amazing moment when God told Moses his personal and eternal name. That was Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, right? The YHVH, the Tetragrammaton is another way that it's called, which just means 4 letters. It's a big fancy, like 50-cent word, but it just means 4 letters. Because Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh can't really be pronounced. It's the unpronounceable name of God. And yet it is the name that he wants to be known by and that he wants to be remembered, Scripture says, by. So we took a couple of weeks to break down Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh when we looked at the pictograph, the Hebrew pictograph. Do y'all remember what the letters tell us?
Like the hand and the nail.
Behold the hand, behold the nail. So Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh are pictures of a hand, a nail, the man standing is the behold, he's looking up, and so it's behold the hand, behold the nail. And that was God's name from eternity past. It will always be his name, therefore telling us a hand and a nail. That points to who? Jesus. So Jesus was always the plan. He wasn't a plan B of, oh gosh, the people sinned again. What are we going to do? Well, right. Jesus, I guess you're going to have to go. No, this was always the plan. And even in the name of God, we see pictures. He is so good, y'all. He's so good. So we spent some time talking about God's name, which again is in the book of Exodus, is what we call it. But in Hebrew, what is the name of the book of Exodus? The book of names. Yes, Shmot, the book of names. So for the Hebrew perspective of this, Exodus is not about the exit, it's really about the names. And so with our Western thinking, Greek-leaning minds, we don't think about that. We're thinking about the Exodus, right? The exit from Egypt, because hello, it's a big deal. But the actual name of this book is pointing to the names that are listed in it. And so we've spent time talking about the names we've seen so far, and specifically Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the name that is to be remembered, as verse 15 says, for all generations. So today we're going to pick up with verse 16 and finish the chapter, and we're going to look at this. This is a conversation now that's happening between Moses and God. This is the burning bush moment, right? There's no person standing there from what we've been able to conclude from the Hebrew, that this is a flame coming out of a bush that is not burning up. A bush in the desert that is dry and which should just go, right? But instead, it's this flame that's continuing, and Moses is having a conversation, essentially, with God, who's in the flame. Okay, so look at verse 16. This is God still speaking. I'm going to read out of the New Living right here just to get the gist of the story, and then we'll dig in deeper. It says, now go and call together all the elders of Israel. Tell them, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me. He told me, I have been watching closely, and I see how the Egyptians are treating you. I have promised to rescue you from your oppression in Egypt. I will lead you to a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. The elders of Israel will accept your message. Then you and the elders must go to the king of Egypt and tell him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. So please let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand forces him. So I will raise my hand and strike the Egyptians, performing all kinds of miracles among them. Then at last he will let you go. And I will cause the Egyptians to look favorably on you. They will give you gifts when you go, so you will not leave empty-handed. Every Israelite woman will ask for articles of silver and gold and fine clothing from her Egyptian neighbors and from the foreign women in their houses. You will dress your sons and daughters with these, stripping the Egyptians of their wealth. Okay, so Moses has just asked, okay, so you're going to send me to the people of Israel. You want me to give them this message that they're supposed to follow me, and I'm supposed to go talk to Pharaoh, and like, what am I going to tell them when they ask me who sent me? So that started kind of this response, and that's when God said, I'm Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. I am who I am who I've always been, and I am who I will be. Okay, and then he goes on with these instructions, these directions. So today I've titled this lesson, Follow the Directions. I don't know if anybody else has ever had trouble with that, but I remember as a kid, like being in school and getting worksheets, you know, they'd hand you out a worksheet, and every now and then the teacher would like tell you nothing except follow the directions. Do you remember, did anybody else have teachers that did that? Yeah. So you had to read and comprehend for yourself what you were supposed to do on that worksheet because she wasn't going to tell you. You had to follow the directions. Well, in this moment, God is giving Moses the directions. He's reading them to him, okay? And he's saying, this is what you were to say. This is where you were to go. This is what you were to do. If only, right, we had those specific directions today. So the first thing there at the top of the page that he says is he says in the closest to Hebrew translation, the interlinear, it says, go and gather together the elders of Israel and say to them, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, God of your fathers has appeared to me. Okay, so again, when you see the word Lord in your Bible with all capitals, L-O-R-D, that is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. My translation I just read filled in Yahweh. That is also Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Okay, so we did a deep dive of study on why that is, and so you can always go back to our YouTube channel and watch the video that explained all of that. And there's some great links for other videos that explain it. But he's specifically saying that you're going to go to them and say, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of your fathers, has sent me. Now, God is affirming his character in this conversation, okay? Before we get into the details of it, I want you right now to realize that God is showing us something about who he is, about his heart. He's told us his name, and now he's saying, okay, this is who I am, as they're having this conversation, okay? And he's also showing it through the message that Moses is supposed to deliver to the Israelites and to Pharaoh. All right? We're seeing God's heart in all of this if we will look. So he says, first, tell the elders. Now, the elders are the representatives of the nation of Israel, okay? They are going to be the heads of the families, households, and tribes, right? So, like, each little tribe has their own head. We know that there were 12 tribes. And then each of the families are going to have a head, right? A man that is in charge of the household, the Abba, if you will, because it is the Bet Av, which is the father's house. And so this is who he's supposed to go and get. Now, I like this quote. Check this out. The first word had to come to the people of God and then to the world. Often, God will not speak to the wider world until he speaks to his people and he has their attention. That's important. We can pray for the world to come to Christ all day long. We can pray for the gospel to be shared all day long. But if we as God's people don't know Christ intimately for ourselves and don't know the gospel, they're not going to get it. It has to come to us first. And then it is an outpouring. God has chosen to work with us, the messed up, sinful people that we are, as the church, to say, you are my representatives now. You are the ones that are going to carry forth this message of love and salvation and mercy and judgment if you refuse. That's our job. That's our whole purpose as a church. And so we've got to get this. And so the elders had to get it. They had to understand first what God was wanting before they could go to Pharaoh. And God says something interesting. My translation doesn't say it this way. Maybe yours does, but it actually is closer like this in the end of verse 16. It says, God is saying, surely I have visited you and seen what is done to you in Egypt. Does anybody's translation say visited you? Yeah? Okay. So this is a very specific word in Hebrew. It's the word pakad. Pakad. And it does mean to visit, to attend to, or to care for someone. Okay? So the first thing I thought of was like home health care. Like they pakad their patients, their clients. They come and they visit them, they tend to them, they pay attention to them, they care for them. Okay? So God is saying, tell the elders that I have visited you. I have been watching. I see what's being done. I have cared for you. I have attended to you. And that's going to be like we've been slaves for over 200 years, but okay, right? But this is what he's saying. Tell them this. This is also evidence of God's involvement, active involvement in the world and in our lives, of the lives of his people specifically. He's like, I see what you're going through. I care about what you're going through. And I'm tending to you. Right? So, Lord, give us eyes to see that care.
Mine says watching closely, which,
yes.
it's not like just I'm hanging out, just kind of observing what's going on.
Yes.
It's really taking note.
It's
really
a personal attention. Sorry, getting a little dry there. And so, that's what he wants to say. Now, the other thing God is saying here is he's going to use a couple of specific words of promise that the elders of Israel would be familiar with. It's going to kind of like, it's going to jog their memory. The first is this, because he's saying, I have visited you. Look back with me at Genesis 50:24. I've got it there for you on the paper because it has the same word, pakad. Okay? Pakad. But Joseph said to his brothers, I am dying. So Joseph's on his deathbed, right? But surely God will visit, pakad you, and bring you out of this land to the land of which he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph took an oath from the sons of Israel, saying, again, surely God will visit you, pakad, and you shall carry up my bones from this place. So Joseph is telling them, God will visit you. God will tend to you. God will care for you. He's going to come. And when he does, I want you to take my bones when you leave. So Joseph is so sure of God's faithfulness and promise. Hello, the guy that's like been through, the hole in the ground and the prison and all the things. He knows God's faithfulness. So he's like, God will do it. And when he does, swear to me that you will take my bones. Don't leave me here. Right? And so that's what happened. So there would have had to be a conversation about this, okay? God knew this specific phrase would speak to the heart of the elders of Israel because surely they had passed down this promise to carry Joseph's bones. Look at Exodus 13:19. Just flip over a couple chapters and somebody read that for me. Exodus 13:19.
Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel swear to do this. He said, God will certainly come to help you. When he does, you must take my bones with you from this place.
God will certainly come to help you. Just take a guess. What do you think that is in Hebrew? Pakad. God will certainly visit you. God will certainly pakad you. It's the same word. And so they had to have passed this down because Moses actually is going to take Joseph's bones with them. So using this specific word, God knew this is what you need to say to them. That I have visited you. I've kept my promise. Joseph's words were true, and that would have triggered a memory. So God also tells Moses to repeat his covenant promise to deliver them from their affliction and bring them to a specific land. So turn over now back, somebody, to Genesis 15 and read 17 through 21 for me. This is God's promise.
Genesis what?
After the
Go ahead.
after the sun went down and darkness fell, Abram saw a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between the halves of the carcasses. So the Lord made a covenant with Abram that day and said, I have given this land to your descendants, all the way from the border of Egypt to the great Euphrates River, the land now occupied by the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, and Rephaites.
So, sorry, is that the end?
The Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites,
Okay.
Jebusites.
All the ites.
Glad you read that.
All the ites. Thank you, Jennifer. That was beautiful. All the ites. All right, that's what we're just going to call them. So God is telling Moses now, you're going to go back to the elders and you're going to say, first of all, I've visited you. That's going to strike up a memory. Second of all, I'm going to bring you into the land of the ites, which I promised Abraham a long time ago. And they're going to remember this because Moses is going to say these specific names. He's missing a few from that list. That's a little bit of a longer list. But he says Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. It's the same area. So the people are going to hear this message from Moses, who they've not seen for how long? Remember how long he's been in the desert? 40 years. He's been shepherding in the desert for 40 years. It's been 40 years since they've laid eyes on him. And now he's going to show up with this message from God. And that's why he's a little nervous, because he's like, how are they going to believe me? And so God is giving him the words to speak that he knows will cause their hearts, because he says, they will heed your voice. They will heed your voice, and you shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt. And you shall say to him, the Pharaoh, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Now let us go, please, 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, our God. So God is saying, okay, the elders are going to believe you, and then you and they are to go before Pharaoh and bring this message to ask if you could travel 3 days to go and make sacrifices to me. Okay, so let's break that down for a second. First of all, it's thought that this is Pharaoh Amenhotep II. Okay, very interesting. I'm so glad Micah shared that link on our chat yesterday about the archaeological stuff. I went and watched actually a video about the tomb, they believe, of Amenhotep II, and how he is likely the Exodus Pharaoh. That he, of all the kings that in the Valley of the Kings where they're all buried, of all the kings' mummies that they have found, his is the only one that has these like boils or sores all over his body.
Wow.
No other pharaoh's body has that. And so it's an excellent little video. I might need to add that to our link, our list of links in the bottom of this.
Amazing.
But it's pretty fascinating. Also, there's what they believe to be a 15-year-old boy's body in that tomb. Well, when a pharaoh was, I'm going way off, but we're just going to chase this rabbit for a second because it's so cool and I like nerd out on this stuff. But there's this 15-year-old, they believe, boy's body that has even like the hairpiece that would make it seem to be that he is a son of Pharaoh. He's a prince. But his body is in this tomb, which tells us he died before the Pharaoh did. Because once a Pharaoh was buried, it was sealed and nothing else was added to that tomb, okay? But this boy's body, which tells us he died before Pharaoh, his daddy, which we would know is when the death angel came and the firstborn of every household was killed. It's amazing. I'll put the link in there. Sorry I didn't. But Amenhotep II, okay? That's the Pharaoh that we're talking about. And you can see that he reigned from 1450 to 1423 BC. Now, this is what they're supposed to say. We're going to break down what God has told them to say. The Lord God of the Hebrews has met with us, okay? Now, this is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. It should be all caps right there. My mistake. He is saying his eternal name. Now, Pharaoh would readily comprehend this statement, okay? What I want you to get is that this was not some big ask. This was actually a very reasonable request that they would be making, okay? He would understand that the Hebrews, being of a different race from the Egyptians, had their own God. I mean, that was known. They were monotheistic. They worshiped one God, whereas the Egyptians were polytheistic. They had more than we can, what do they say? Here's an East Texas saying. They had more gods than band camps got beans. Y'all remember? Anybody know that statement? No. Okay, well, there's some East Texas hick for you. Okay, They had a lot of gods, is all I'm trying to say, okay? And it wouldn't be awkward or odd to him to think that their God would give them a request or a directive like this, okay? Because sometimes the gods of Egypt would tell the Pharaoh the same thing, okay? And so it shouldn't have been that big of a request. Now, he specifically says, let us go a 3 days journey, okay? I love this. The necessity for withdrawing to so great a distance arose from the remarkable peculiarity in the Egyptian religion of the worship of animals. So, Egyptians, that's a fancy way to say Egyptians worshipped animals, okay? And specifically white cows. Cows, but white cows, they were especially holy. They worshipped sheep and sometimes goats, okay? These were all of the animals that the Hebrew people are supposed to sacrifice. So, if they wanted to offer the correct sacrifice that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh required of them, they would probably have some issues with their Egyptian neighbors. Okay? There would probably be like a little street brawl happen. There's going to be a fight because they would be killing what was sacred to the Egyptians. So, again, they're saying, let us go 3 days into the wilderness because that would get us far enough away from any Egyptian that we would have the freedom to worship our God the way he tells us to. Okay, so that's why they're asking for 3 days. Now, that is supposed to be a 3 day that would most scholars think it would include the going and the coming. That's a whole heck of a lot of people to move in 3 days' time. So, I don't know if that's correct, but I found that in several of my studies. Okay, and so, the refusal of Pharaoh and the subsequent proceedings were revealed to Moses. God told him, Pharaoh's going to tell you no. He's not going to approve your request. He let him know right up front. And so this is, in a way, this is God, I don't want to jump ahead, but this is God being, showing them, giving them the opportunity to believe, to know that God's word is true. Okay? So, the wilderness that they asked to go into would specifically be what is now known as El Tih, or El Tih Plateau. This is the only map I could find that had that name on it. So I want you to see, I know it's kind of hard to look at because it's blue and it makes you think it's water, but it's not. The dark blue is the water. You can see the Red Sea there. But El Tih Plateau, they are up in the upper left, like where Cairo, kind of that area. They're up in Goshen. That's the area they're in. So they would cross over. You can see there's land there. They would avoid the water. And they would want to go down into this area known as the El Tih Plateau. And so they specifically wanted, again, to be far enough away from the Egyptians that they would not be seen or heard doing what they were doing with those animals. And again, God says, but I am sure. If God says, I am sure.
He's sure.
I'm thinking he's pretty sure. Okay, got it. I am sure the king of Egypt will not let you go unless by a mighty hand. Okay, so God prepared them for Pharaoh's no, all right? Even though it was a reasonable request, God in his omniscience, knowing Pharaoh was going to say no. I mean, God already knows how everything's going to go down in every situation that we face. He already knows. He tells them this, okay, be prepared. He's not going to let you do it. God didn't want Moses or the elders to be discouraged by this no. How kind. How kind that he's like, yeah, no, I'm not going to let that. It's not going to happen. Okay? But don't get discouraged. Instead, he told them it would happen so that when the no came, they could believe Moses' mission was from God. So Moses could go in and tell the elders, okay, we're going to go before Pharaoh and we're going to request this, but God's already told me he's going to say no. And so when that no came, they were all like, okay. If they had any doubts before, they were like, okay, Moses actually knows what he's talking about here. Okay? So the other part of this statement that is super interesting is where we're going to have our little Hebrew geek moment, is we're going to learn about this word, mighty hand. Okay? So the word for hand is yad, which is like the Hebrew letter yud that's in Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. It is the hand, all right? But the word in front of it, that describing word, the adjective for us, mighty. It is the Hebrew word kazak, and it does mean strong, mighty, firm, and powerful, okay? here's the cool thing is it is first mentioned in this verse. Prior mighty hand has been mentioned. Now going forward, we're going to hear about it a lot through the whole rest of the Old Testament, okay? But this is the first moment in history that God, and he's saying it himself, Pharaoh's not going to let you go except by a mighty, a Kazakh hand, okay? And so, you know, if it's the first mention, I'm going to dig in. And so I looked at the letters, and the Hebrew pictograph looks like this. It's spelled Het Sadi Kof. Het Sadi Kof. And so you've got the pictures. I've got my little sticker thing, magnets. There we go. But I've got it on the page for you too. So Het is the picture of a tent wall because they lived in tents, right? And it gives the idea of separation, protection, or enclosing something. Okay, and then you have the picture of the sadi, which is the picture of a man lying on his side. Okay, he's laying on his side, and this gives the idea of just or righteous, but it also gives the idea of hunt, chase, or journey. So when you look at these letters, you have to look at the context to kind of figure out what story they're telling. But I think all of those can work in here, and you'll see in just a second. And then the Kof is the picture of the horizon. So it's like the sun on the horizon, right? The circle with the line through it. And it tells the story of something that circles or condenses or time, right? Because we measure time with the sun, right? So when we look at what the pictures of mighty Kazakh tell us, look at this. The meaning of a mighty hand is it's the hand that separates, protects, and encloses. Only a mighty hand can do those things. A mighty hand is the hand that is just and righteous, that will hunt, chase, or journey. And the mighty hand is the hand that encircles. So, look at what he says next in verse 20. He says, so I will stretch out my hand. In that verse, he says, a mighty hand. But then the very next words, he says, so I will stretch out my hand. Telling us his hand is Kazakh. His hand is mighty. I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all my wonders. And after that, he will let you go. Which we know the story, right? So God knew the only way Pharaoh would cooperate with God's plan, was only if a mighty hand convinced him. I just want to pause right there and say, like literally, I'm not being funny, like this is serious. Lord, help me to never have to be only convinced by a mighty hand. Let our hearts be tender and open to what God is speaking and doing. Lord, don't have to use your mighty hand with me. I mean, that's not the place you want to be. I want the hand circling and closing and protecting me. I don't want it chasing and hunting. Unless I've gone off the rails, then yes, come find me. But I see how God's mighty hand does all of that. Does all of it. So, Pharaoh, he's going to see God's hand separate and protect the Israelites. Because when the death angel passes over them and none of their firstborns are killed, they've been separated and protected. Pharaoh is going to see justice and righteousness in God's hand, especially when he would chase and hunt the Egyptians down at the Red Sea. Justice and righteousness is going to come from God's hand. And it's going to be a wonderful thing for God's people, and it's going to be a devastating thing for those who are not his. That hasn't changed. Pharaoh is going to see God's hand encircle the Israelites with protection. He's going to see the walls of water part at the Red Sea. He is going to see them be carried across on dry land. But at the same time, he's going to see that same hand encircle the Egyptians with chaos and death when the waters crash back over them. Back to Amenhotep II, some say, oh, well, he was killed in the waters of the Red Sea, and so there would be no mummy, there would be no remains for this for this Pharaoh. But there's two arguments against that. First of all, we know that kings would often send their soldiers out ahead while they stayed back and watched the battle. So it's possible that he watched all the happenings of the Red Sea and he was not one of the ones that was drowned. The other possibility is that if he did go into the water, it says later in Exodus that the Israelites saw the bodies of the Egyptians on the land. And so they were washed back onto shore. And if anybody is going to be saved, if any dead body is going to be, those remains are going to be collected and returned, it's going to be Pharaoh's. So it's very likely that those are his remains with the boils. So again, go watch the video. It's super cool. So he's saying he's going to see my mighty hand. And after that, he's going to let you go. And then the next phrase he says, and I will give this people, the Egyptians, favor. I will give you, this people, the Israelites, favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And it shall be that when you go, you shall not go out empty-handed, so you shall plunder Egypt. So this is, again, these are details and directions that they need to pay attention to, right? So I love the fact that most of the time when you read scripture, if you see the word favor, it's the word chen or chen, you could say it like that, which is the word for grace. I will give you grace in the eyes of the Egyptians. Who was the first person that found grace in the eyes of the Lord? Anybody remember? Come on, y'all know the song? Hit it. Hit it. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah found. Okay, again, lots of my East Texas coming out of me today. Sorry, not sorry. So Noah was the very first person back in Genesis chapter 6 when it says, and Noah found grace within the eyes of the Lord. So it is grace, it is favor, it is charm. When you say something is graceful, it's charming, right? It's all of those things. Awesome pictographic story. If we get done, I will tell you what the pictures mean. But God promised to arrange things not only to move Pharaoh's heart, but also to move the heart of the Egyptian people, right? They're going to be willing at this point to give them what they wanted, okay? They would shower them, if you will, with their clothing and gold and silver. I like this, Barnes says, this was not stealing or extortion, as we're going to see. It was the appropriate wages for the years of forced labor, okay? The other thing is this, God sometimes makes the enemies of his people not only to be at peace with them, but to be kind to them. And he has many ways of balancing accounts between the injured and the injurious, of righting the oppressed and compelling those that have done wrong to make restitution. Look at what Proverbs 16:7 says. If you don't have this highlighted in your word, you need to highlight it. It says, when people's lives please the Lord, even their enemies are at peace with them. So, do you have an enemy today? If you do, seek out to be walking in the ways of the Lord. And when your life is in that place, your enemies, guess what? They have to be quiet. They have to be quiet. So this is his word. When people's lives please the Lord, even their enemies are at peace with them. And so God was pleased with the Israelites. He was pleased. He loved them. They're his chosen people. And so he's going to make their enemies cooperate and show them kindness and peace. The Hebrew women specifically were to ask the Egyptian women for these things. Now, think about this, though. These are the very women who have just lost their children. These are the moms, right, that the Israelites are going to have to go to and say, will you give me? Will you give us? Now, it's very likely that these mothers whose hearts are ripped out of their chest would be inclined to comply with the request because they might fear something worse could happen if they don't. Yeah. Sure, take it. Take whatever you want. Just take it and go. Take it. I also Egyptian people didn't have the same thought process as Pharaoh, and they might have been fine with the Israelites leaving. They might not have agreed with his no until plague number 10. They might have been like after plague number 1, yep, let them go. So they're like, yes, please take this and be on your way. All right. Now the word used here for empty-handed is a specific word called rekam. And it is used to describe that state of being empty-handed or without gain. It often conveys the idea of futility or lack of success. In the context of the Bible, it is used to express situations where efforts yield no results, and when someone departs without receiving what they might have expected. Okay, that's a great way of saying they had been working for 200 plus years as slaves in Egypt with zero compensation, right? They couldn't even get a 3-day break to go worship in the wilderness. So, this is God's way. He's like, you're not going to leave without being compensated. You're not going to leave without some sort of success. All that work that you've done, that your ancestors have done, will not be in vain. There will be something that comes of it, okay? This was a big deal in the Near Eastern cultures back in this time. The concept of leaving empty-handed was significant, especially in the context of hospitality, trade, and worship, okay? They were not supposed to leave empty-handed. Especially, God is going to teach them in Deuteronomy 15, 12 through 14. He's going to tell them, if you have a slave that you release, that they finish their work, you don't let them leave empty-handed. And in verse 14, he says, remember, you were slaves in Egypt. So he's going to give them this very directive of what he's doing right now. By not allowing them as slaves to leave empty-handed, he's then going to direct them in Deuteronomy to not let their slaves leave empty-handed. Remember what I did for you. And then you do that for them. Okay, so he's setting up a principle that's going to follow them for the rest of their lives. And then it says, in this way you will plunder Egypt. Okay, you will plunder Egypt. When I hear plunder, I immediately think of pirates and doubloons and all the things, right? And typically something that's like being stolen. But that is not the picture here. That is not the picture. This is a plundering for God's glory. This is a glorious thing. So jewels and trinkets of gold and silver is what they're going to be given, as well as fine clothing of different types of fabrics, right? Because the Egyptians were wealthy. They were the wealthiest nation on the planet at this time. So they're going to have the fine linens and the purple and the scarlet thread and all the things. I mean, they wore tons of jewelry. Things I read talked about the men sometimes wore more jewelry than the women. The cuffs on the arms, all the earrings, the facial rings, all the things. They wore a lot of jewelry, and it was gold and it was silver. Okay? And so there would have been a lot to give. But here, this is really cool. Look at Exodus 35, if you will. Turn over to Exodus 35. All of these things, I just love it. God's going to use in the making of the sacred objects for the tabernacle. I love it. It says Exodus 35, 20 through 24. It says, so the whole community of Israel left Moses and returned to their tents. All whose hearts were stirred and whose spirits were moved came and brought their sacred offerings to the Lord. They brought all the materials needed for the tabernacle, for the performance of its rituals, and for the sacred garments. Both men and women came, all whose hearts were willing. They brought to the Lord their offerings of, catch it, gold. Mine says brooches, earrings, rings from their fingers, and necklaces. They presented gold objects of every kind as a special offering to the Lord. And then you could go on. It says, all those who owned the following items willingly brought them: blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen and goat hair for cloth, and tanned ram skins and the fine goat skin leather. All who had silver and bronze objects gave them as a sacred offering to the Lord, and those who had acacia wood brought it for use in the project. Where do you think they got all this stuff?
Yeah.
From the Egyptians. So we call it plunder, but it is God's way of preparing them and providing for them what they're going to need that they don't even know they're going to need. How good is He? He prepares us with things. He prepares us. He told them, no, they're not going to let you do that. That's not going to happen just now, but it's going to happen later this way. So He's preparing their hearts in that. And then He's like, oh, and by the way, you're going to need all this. You're going to need all of these things to bring me glory, to make the tabernacle, to create the space where I will come down and meet with people. God is so good to give them what they need. Now, Egypt had spoiled Israel by the tributary labor, right? So harsh labor, so unjustly enforced. And now Israel carried off the spoil of Egypt, a prelude to the victory which the people of God will one day obtain in their conflict with the power of the world. And that leads us, in our closing, to Zechariah chapter 14. Now, Zechariah, we know, is a prophet. And a lot of what he writes about, we also find in Revelation. So this is end time prophecy that we're talking. In chapter 14, I want to start at verse 1. It says, "Watch, for the day of the Lord is coming, when your possessions will be plundered right in front of you." Okay, he's talking to the world. Then you look down at the last of verse 5. It says, "Then the Lord my God will come, and all his holy ones with him." So we're talking about the second coming right here, where we have already been raptured and taken to be with the Lord. And we are the holy ones that will be coming back with him at the second coming. And then look specifically at what it says in verse 14. "Judah too will be fighting at Jerusalem. The wealth of all the neighboring nations will be captured. Great quantities of gold and silver and fine clothing." So again, this is going to be done when the Lord comes again and everything is taken for his glory. So we see this playing out even in the future that is to come. So I love that. I love his promises in this and the heart that we see of God. So what are your takeaways? Anything that I missed that you want to add, or any aha moments that the Lord had for you today?
Lots of them.
Lots of them.
Yeah.
Well, I just couldn't help but see God's heart in all of this. Even though he's giving this, like, layout of the plan that we already know the story to, just how kind to give that information and to prepare the people's hearts. So he's just so good. He's good.
Well, God did not give them the wealth of the Egyptians to make them personally wealthy. He made that for them to give and use later. And I think that's
A principle for us to carry forward too.
yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, that's what really, when we get into the Shema, that's what it says.
Yes.
Because when it says to love the Lord with all your heart,
It's all your
with all your
stuff.
soul, and all
Yep.
your might or strength, that
your
word
possessions.
actually means possessions. And so he's saying, even with all that you have, it's for my glory. You're supposed to love me with it. So yeah, he's already setting that up. That's so good. So good. Okay. Well, next week we will be having our prayer time for Pray First. So I'm really into getting into chapter 4. So I may do a little bit of chapter 4 next week. We might pray and then do chapter 4. I don't know how
Because
to
she
decide
can't
yet.
stand it. She has to do
Can't
it.
stand it. So, but I hope that you'll be back with us next week. So thank y'all for being here this morning. And I pray that the Lord uses this somehow in your heart today and for the rest of the week. So y'all are dismissed. Thanks for being here. Hey, thanks for joining us online. So come back next time when we will be in Exodus chapter 4.
Thank you very much.